This chapter examines the topic of second language acquisition in more detail. How does second language acquisition differ from first? How do children and adults store the two sets of words in their lexicon? How do the children manage to keep the language apart? How do they learn to recognize the two distinct languages are in? By the end of this chapter, you should be able to know how young children can acquire two languages simultaneously, understand how we can learn a language in adulthood, plus have some idea about how a second language should best be taught. What is bilingualism? Bilingualism is the ability to speak and understand two languages fluently. It's more than just knowing a few phrases. It's mean having a strong command of both languages, including grammar, vocabulary, and cultural. For example, a child raised in a home where both parents speak different languages. They learn both languages naturally, becoming bilingual from a young age. If a speaker is fluent in two languages, then they are said to be bilingual. A commonly held image of a bilingual person is of someone brought up in a culture where they are exposed to two languages from birth. It is not necessary for them to be equally fluent in both languages, but at least they should be very competent in the second one. Three categories of bilingualism. First, simultaneous bilingualism. This occurs when a child is exposed to two languages from birth, acquire both languages naturally and simultaneously, often without any conscious effort. Number two, early sequential bilingualism. This happens when a person learns a second language after already acquiring their first language. This can occur at any age, but it's typically referred to as second language acquisition. Third, late bilingualism. It refers to the acquisition of a second language after childhood, typically after the critical period. This means starting to learn a new language as a teenager or adult. Leopold, 1939-1949, he was a German-American linguist and psychologist who made significant contribution to the field of child language acquisition. While not directly known as German linguist, in the sense of focusing on the German language specifically, he was a prominent figure in the development of linguistics and the study on how children learn language. The advantages of being bilingual. Bilingualism also has costs and benefits for other aspects of cognitive processing. Bilingual people tend to have a slight deficit in cognitive processing in working memory at tasks that are carried out in learning too. On the other hand, they show clear gains in metalinguistic awareness and cognitive flexibility, and superior verbal fluency. For example, Lambert Tucker and found that children in the Canadian immersion program tended to score more highly on tests of creativity than monolingual. On the other hand, there is no overwhelming body of research showing that bilingualism confers a general cognitive advantages in the form of enhanced flexibility. There is even evidence that being bilingual protects people to some extent against developing Alzheimer's disease by helping to build up mind's cognitive reserve that allows non-cognitive aging. Bilingual language processing. In separate stores model, there are separate lexicon for each language. These are connected at the semantic level. Evidence from the separate store model comes from the findings that the amount of facilitation gained by repeating a word, a technique called repetition priming, is much greater and longer lasting within that between language. Although repetition priming might not be tapping semantic process, in common store models there is just one lexicon and one semantic memory system, with words from both languages stored in it and connected directly together. This model is supported by evidence that semantic priming procedure facilitation between language. Other possibility is that some people use a mixture of common and separate store. For example, concrete word cognates. Concrete word refers to something that can be perceived by the senses like touch, sight, smell, taste, or sound. Example, chair. You can see, touch, and sit on a chair. Cognates. Cognates are words in different languages that share a common origin and have similar meaning. Example, animal in English and animal in Spanish. Both words come from the Latin word animal and share the same meaning. Bilingual syntactic processing. There has been much less research on how bilingual people process syntax than there has on how they process that use similar sort of construction. Do people store syntactic knowledge separately for each language or just one? In a shared store, a study of Spanish-English bilingual speaker found that particular syntactic structure is one's language could make it easier to use the same structure in the second language, supporting the shared syntax idea. Similarly, Lobel and Black 2003 found that production of German datives primed the subsequent use of English datives and vice versa. Similar results have been found in Dutch-English bilingual. Translating between language. Translating language can be fraught with difficulties. Roll and Stewart 1994 proposed that transaction by second language devices is an asymmetric process. They argued that we translate words from our first language into the second language called forward translation. By conceptual mediation, this means that we must assess the meaning of a word in order to translate it. In contrast, we translate from the second language into the first, called backward translation. By word associative, that is, we use direct links between items in the lexicon. The evidence for this asymmetry is the semantic factors. For example, the word how are you? In English and in Spanish, hola, ¿cómo estás?
The neuroscience of bilingualism. Neuroscience of bilingualism is a fascinating field that explores how the brain processes and manages multiple languages. Research has shown that bilingualism has profound effect on brain structure and function, leading to several cognitive advantages. There is some evidence that bilinguals with right hemisphere damage show more aphasia, cross aphasia than monolinguals. Cross aphasia might arise because the right hemisphere is involved in L2 acquisition, particularly in L2 is acquired relatively late or because language is less hemistrically represented in the two hemispheres. In bilingual speakers, although this is highly controversial, an ERP study of responses to work in 1922 months old English-Spanish bilingual children show that the more dominant language become lateralized before the less dominant one. For example, we can observe pathological switching and mixing of language and difficulties in translating between the language. Model of bilingualism. The most influential model of bilingualism that attempts to tell a complete story of the psychological process involved is the bilingual interactive activation plus BIA plus model. A development of the original BIA model to include phonological and sub-lexical levels of processing. See Dick Star Van Haven in 2002. The model attempt to bring together all types of evidence concerning the orthographical process of two language but make use recognize cognates. Words that look the same or very similar in two languages, such as silence in English the and French of or animal in English. Representation works phonemes collected together by facilitatory and inhibitory correction. So, here are the three examples of how this model explains some common bilingual phenomena. 1. Language proficiency. 2. Context. And 3. Code switching. So, what's the language proficiency? The strength of activational for each language depend on the individual's proficiency in each language. A more proficiency language will have a stronger activation. The next one, context. Surrounding words and the situation also influence which language is activated. If you're in a Spanish speaking environment, Spanish will be more active. And the last one, code switching. If the context or the speaker intentional changes, the activation levels can shift, allowing for code switching. So, this is for the note important. The BIA Plus model is a simplified presentation. Research continue to explore the complex interplay between language in the bilingual brain. Second language acquisition. A second language acquisition happens when a child or an adult has already become competent at a language or then attempt to learn another. We should distinguish between learning a second language naturalistically when a child or person moves to a new country, and class based in instruction. There are a number of reasons why a person might find learning, particularly involving syntax, are more difficult outside the period. Second, older children and adults have less. So, this is some evidence that course of L2 acquisition follow a U-shaped curve. Initial learning is good, but then is a decline in performance before the learner becomes more skilled. Lutlin and Heredia in 1966, the decline in performance is associated with a substitution of more complex internal representation for less complex ones. That is, the learner knowledge becomes structure of example. For example, as a learner moves from learning by role to using syntax rules, utterance tend to become shorter. A number of methods have been used to teach a second language. See figure 5.22. The traditional method is based on translation from one to another, which lecture in grammar in the primary language direct method such as the Berlitz. How we can make second language acquisition easier. Second language acquisition is often characterized by a pace or paces or silent periods, when few productions are offered despite obvious development of comprehension. Classroom teaching method that force students to speak in this silent period must be doing more harm than good. In Newmark 1966 argued that this has an effect of forcing the speaker back onto the rule of the first language. Hence, silence period should be respected. And Krashen in 1982 argue we should make second language acquisition more like first like acquisition by providing sufficient comprehensible input. The immersion method involving complete exposure to L2 exemplifies these ideas. Whole school in Montreal, Canada contain English-speaking children who are taught in French in all subjects from their first year. Bruce and Lambert in Tucker in 1976. Immersion seems to have no deleterious effect, and if anything might be beneficial for other areas of development. Mathematics. The French acquired is very good but not perfect. This as slight accent and syntactic errors are something mode. 4 CS of successful modern language teaching. Communication. Emphasizes is a oral communication. For example, hey, want to go grab coffee tomorrow? They reply, sure. What time works for you? The confidence give it to learners. Confidence is the feeling or belief that you can do something well or succeed at something. It's a sense of self-assurance and trust in your abilities. The third one, content. Providing comprehensible input. And the last one, culture. Learning about the culture and the emphasizing direction translation. Evaluation work on bilingualism and second language acquisition. The study of bilingualism and second language acquisition is an increasingly important topic in psycholinguistics. First, the way in which bilingual people represent and process two languages in of great interest of psycholinguistics. Second, it is clearly important that we should be able to teach a second language in the most efficient way. Third, provide us with additional tools for investigating language and cognition. Example, Altarriba and Sultana in 1996 used knowledge of how bilinguals store language to investigate the phenomenon known as repetition blindness. Repetition blindness refers to the observation the people are very poor and recalling repeated where the words are presented. For example, when of the given the sentence, she ate salad and fish even though the fish was raw. Participants show very poor recall of the second presentation of the words. Fish, the explanation of repetition blindness is that the repeated of word is not recognized as a distinct even somehow become assimilated with the first representation of the word. It appears to be the visual and phonological non-sound similarity that is important in generating repetition blindness. Words that sound the same, one and one. Kumbaga, panalo tsaka yung numero na number 1. 1 and 1. So, yun. Produce repetition blindness, whereas words that are similar in meaning. Autumn and fall. Thank you. Altarriba and Saltano confirmed that meaning plays no part in repetition blindness using non-cognate translation equivalents. These are the words in different language that have the same meaning but different physical form. For example, nephew and sobrino is very English and Spanish. Clearly, similarity in meaning cannot be responsible for the repetition blindness effect. The result also showed that conceptual access in translation is very rapid for bilingual speakers, and also that bilingualism may facilitate some aspect of memory.
Summary: Bilingualism is a rewarding journey offering numerous benefits. Second language acquisition is a process that requires dedication, effective strategies, and a supportive learning environment. While there are challenges, the reward of becoming bilingual are significant. Second language acquisition in adulthood and later childhood is difficult. It is not like first language acquisition with some general cognitive. There are probably both and costs and benefits of learning two languages at once. There might be some general cognitive advantages. There has been much debate as to how we translate words between language, in particular whether or not there are links between in our mental dictionaries, or whether the entries are mediated by semantic links. Translation probably does involve conceptual mediation. Bilingualism is useful tool studying other language processes.